So last night I got to see Jethro Tull on their 7 Decades tour. Let's discuss, shall we? I must admit, having enjoyed seeing Jethro Tull many times in concert over the years, there's no doubt that this is certainly not the same band. But we still get Anderson very much at the fore, amusing us with his little anecdotes and skipping around like some aged Pied Piper. That being said, he carries himself very well and surrounds himself with musicians he knows are pretty top-notch who can certainly do the job. And he chooses a set list and rearranges the set to now fit his ageing voice. One thing that did intrigue me about this show was the lack of acoustic instruments. Absolutely zilch, which certainly changes the palette of a Jethro Tull show. No balalaikas or mandolins or no lutings, so to speak. And Ian Anderson himself didn't place one paw on an acoustic guitar, so no Life's a Long Song, no Wandering Aloud, and surprisingly, no Thick as a Brick. But what this does is it certainly changes the palette of a Tull show, and the songs selected accordingly. We get numbers that are rearranged, of course, to suit Anderson's voice now, and we get that Tull classic Aqualung about that wheezy old soap dodger. It's been rearranged to the point as being almost unrecognisable, but still eyeing up little girls with bad intent. He doesn't go for the familiar greatest hit show here. I imagine the selection of material has a lot to do with material that you can actually perform these days. It starts off with that very bluesy My Sunday feeling from the debut album This Was, which follows hard upon by We Used to Know from the Stand Up album. Then he launches into his dialogue of how the Eagles allegedly, I say allegedly because that Don Henley's a litigious old fucker, isn't he? Lifted certain elements of We Used to Know for their classic Hotel California. And Jack Clark, who does a wonderful job on guitar in this show, by the way, incorporates rather wittily some elements of Hotel California into the end of this number. And we got that wonderful paean on the inevitability of changing times, which is Heavy Horses, a title track. That wonderful album from 1978, arguably some argue is their very, very best. And it's performed well, I think. I think that segues straight into Weathercock, which was also nice to hear. But one of the highlights of the evening for me is how Stormwatch got a bit of a dusting off. We got the beautiful instrumental Warm Sporran. There are a few instrumentals here in this show. Obviously, to give Ian Anderson's tonsils a rest, there was Boré, Warm Sporran, and there was that Christmas song from the Christmas album. I can't remember what it was called, but he did that one. Merry something or other. But going back to Stormwatch, the highlight of the evening for me was that prophetic end of days epic, Dark Ages. Interestingly, in Robin Askew's review for the Bristol Beacon, he states, "The absence of long-serving, hard-rocking guitarist Martin Barr is still keenly felt by many fans, but Anderson has successfully pulled off the elder statesman of rock trick by recruiting some exceptional younger musicians. We all know his voice isn't what it used to be, as one might expect of a man of 76, so expectations are recalibrated accordingly." And they are recalibrated accordingly. I went to the show expecting to find Anderson struggling vocally, but he carries it off simply by the sheer weight of his personality and charisma, I think, as a performer. There was so much love for him in that audience as well. And he's playing to a packed-out show at the Cambridge Corn Exchange, so they're still doing quite well, I think. Back to the set list, we get an intermission, and then we get Farm on the Freeway from the wonderful Metallica baiting Crest of an Ave album. I love that album. It's a very American sounding album, of course, but I always feel that something like Budapest is almost like the quintessential Jethro Tull number. Interestingly, he chose Roots to Branches and Farm on the Freeway, 2 albums recorded when Anderson's voice had already significantly changed, an older Ian with a different timbre, I think, making them easier perhaps for him to vocally stomach these days. In terms of his voice, he does call on vocal support from Jack Clark, who very much was instrumental in helping them get through Dark Ages, as well as bassist David Goodyear and the heavily bearded John O'Hara. Nevertheless, Anderson is still a remarkable musician and impresses with his wheezy flautistry. He does make reference to Christians and upsetting Christians, and I was thinking we're going to get My God. But instead he launches straight into the Zealot Gene, whose title track, of course, dealing with the rise of right-wing zealotry and left-wing authoritarianism, I guess. Of the newer material, we get Mine is the Mountain, which is an interesting number about, in Anderson's word, an interventionist God that gives us stuff. almost reminding me of the sentiment expressed by Nick Cave in his Into My Arms on his wonderful Boatman Calls album. Then we get Mrs. Tibbets from the Zealot Gene, a number very much about the mother of Paul Tibbets, who dropped the first bomb on Hiroshima. Anderson says that his mother remained very proud of her son, but my advice would be to keep your pants on next time. There are a couple of numbers from Rock Flute, or Rock Flirter, however you want to pronounce it. I'll go for the English pronunciation, Rock Flute. And of course we get the encore, which is the fairly predictable Locomotive Breath, which Anderson still handles fairly well, I think. Obviously during Locomotive Breath, the mobile phone filming embargo is lifted, and all the phones go up and people take home those lovely little snapshots and films that we will see on YouTube. And that kind of ends the show. We get a pre-recording of Cheerio from the Broadsword album as they all come out and take their bows. But no balloons. Overall, I came away thinking it was a rather pleasant show, which I rather enjoyed. A wonderful evening of live music, and that's something these days in the age of miming and backing tracks. Does it possess the energy and the power of a classic Tull gig? Well, not really, because Anderson's kind of knocking on a bit these days. But nevertheless, a thoroughly enjoyable evening, I would say. Anyway, there you go. That's my impression of seeing Jethro Tull at the Cambridge Corn Exchange last night. I'd love to know if you were there and what your impressions are of that particular gig. Anyway, I'll urge you to share this video if you enjoyed it. Do click like, subscribe, and check that notification bell. And more importantly, check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work, that classic album review. It's always much appreciated. Become a Patreon, why not? There's a fine body of work on there now. Nice classic rock community we're building there. Anyway, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.